In a world increasingly threatened by climate change, scientists are turning to an unexpected ally: ancient rice varieties that have survived for millennia. These forgotten crops, some dating back 3,000 years to early Yangtze River basin civilizations, possess remarkable abilities to withstand flooding that modern varieties lack. Join us as we explore how archaeology and agricultural science are converging to revive these resilient crops, potentially securing food supplies for millions across Asia's most vulnerable regions. Our story begins in 2019, along the Pearl River in southern China, where archaeobotanists made a discovery that would challenge modern agricultural practices. While excavating underwater archaeological sites, researchers uncovered preserved rice grains that initially seemed like mere historical artifacts. However, genetic analysis revealed something extraordinary: these ancient specimens possessed remarkable flood tolerance mechanisms that most modern rice varieties lack. This wasn't just an archaeological curiosity, it was potentially a solution to one of the most pressing challenges facing rice farmers today. The discovery prompted researchers to expand their search across Southeast Asia, where they found evidence that flood-resistant rice cultivation was once widespread throughout the region, particularly during periods of historical climate instability. These ancient farmers had adapted to changing conditions in ways that modern agriculture had forgotten in its pursuit of higher yields. To understand the significance of these ancient varieties, we need to look at what replaced them. During the Green Revolution of the 1960s, traditional rice varieties were largely abandoned in favor of high-yield cultivars that promised to feed growing populations. This agricultural transformation succeeded in boosting production, but it came at a cost. The genetic diversity of rice crops diminished dramatically as farmers worldwide adopted standardized varieties. In the pursuit of higher yields under ideal conditions, valuable traits like flood resistance were inadvertently bred out of commercial rice. The sub-1A gene, present in many ancient varieties, was one such casualty. This gene essentially puts the rice plant into dormancy during flooding, conserving energy until waters recede, allowing it to survive complete submersion for up to 3 weeks. Modern commercial varieties, lacking this adaptation, typically die after just a few days underwater. As climate change increases the frequency and severity of flooding across Asia's rice-growing regions, this lost trait has become increasingly valuable. While commercial agriculture moved toward standardization, isolated pockets of traditional farming continued across Asia. In remote valleys and highlands, farmers maintained ancient cultivation methods, inadvertently becoming custodians of agricultural biodiversity that would prove invaluable generations later. The International Rice Research Institute, IRRI, in the Philippines recognized the importance of these traditional practices and began working with a network of seed banks and indigenous farming communities to identify and preserve ancient varieties. Their efforts have uncovered over 40 distinct flood-resistant landraces maintained through traditional farming. One particularly promising variety, locally known as Jola Dhan in parts of eastern India and Bangladesh, exemplifies these ancient adaptations. This variety has been cultivated continuously for centuries in flood-prone regions, passed down through generations of farmers who recognized its value long before modern science could explain its resilience. These farming communities didn't preserve these varieties out of scientific foresight, but rather through cultural practices and traditional knowledge that recognized the importance of maintaining diverse crop options for unpredictable conditions. When scientists began studying these rediscovered varieties, they found much more than flood resistance. These ancient strains exhibit greater genetic diversity than modern commercial varieties, providing valuable genetic resources for addressing multiple climate challenges simultaneously. Advanced genomic analysis has identified genes conferring resistance to drought, salt tolerance, and specific pest resistances that had been inadvertently bred out of modern varieties. The sub-1A gene, responsible for flood tolerance, works through a fascinating mechanism. When submerged, rice plants containing this gene enter a state similar to hibernation, drastically reducing their metabolism and halting growth until floodwaters recede. Once the waters subside, the plants resume growth almost immediately, while varieties without this gene typically die from oxygen deprivation or exhaust their energy reserves trying to grow above the water level. This genetic reservoir represents an invaluable resource for future breeding programs, especially as climate conditions shift unpredictably across rice-growing regions. Scientists are now using these discoveries to develop new varieties that combine ancient resilience with modern productivity. The past year has seen accelerated field trials of these rediscovered varieties in flood-prone regions of Bangladesh, eastern India, and Vietnam. The results have been remarkable. Test plots of ancient varieties showed 70 to 85% survival rates during flash floods compared to just 10 to 20% for modern varieties without the sub-1A gene. While these ancient varieties produce approximately 15 to 20% lower yields than modern high-producing varieties under ideal conditions, they significantly outperform them under flood stress. In practical terms, this means a more reliable harvest in unpredictable conditions, a trade-off many farmers in vulnerable regions are eager to make. What makes this development particularly significant is the speed of implementation. Rather than requiring years of genetic modification or selective breeding, these varieties are immediately available for cultivation. Local agricultural extension programs have begun distributing seeds to farmers in the most vulnerable regions, with over 100,000 hectares now planted with these rediscovered varieties. The implementation has been facilitated by innovative distribution networks that combine government agricultural services with local farmer cooperatives, ensuring that knowledge about cultivation practices accompanies the seeds. The scientific community has adopted multiple approaches to maximize the impact of these rediscoveries. Some researchers focus on the direct reintroduction of ancient varieties in their pure form, particularly in regions where traditional cultivation practices remain. These scientists work closely with local farmers to document and preserve traditional knowledge about growing these varieties. Others are working on crossbreeding ancient varieties with modern high-yield types to create hybrids that combine flood resistance with improved productivity. Advanced genomic techniques have accelerated this process, allowing scientists to identify and track specific genetic markers associated with flood tolerance without waiting through multiple growing seasons. Additionally, researchers are documenting the traditional knowledge systems that preserved these varieties, recognizing that indigenous agricultural practices often contain sophisticated ecological understanding that complements modern scientific approaches. This interdisciplinary collaboration between archaeologists, geneticists, agronomists, and local farmers has been essential to the project's success. By combining the wisdom of traditional farming with cutting-edge genetic science, researchers are creating agricultural systems that are both productive and resilient. Beyond the agricultural benefits, this revival carries significant economic and cultural weight. For farming communities frequently devastated by crop losses during monsoon flooding, these varieties represent food security and financial stability. Early adopting communities in Bangladesh's Sylhet region reported their first successful harvests in 3 years following particularly severe monsoon seasons. The economic impact extends beyond individual farmers to strengthen regional food systems and reduce dependency on emergency food aid following flood events. The reintroduction also represents a form of agricultural heritage preservation. Many of these varieties carry cultural significance in their regions of origin, featuring in traditional dishes and ceremonies that had begun to fade as the plants themselves became scarce. Elderly farmers in several communities have reported emotional connections to seeing varieties they remember from their childhoods returning to their fields. This cultural revival has renewed interest in traditional agricultural knowledge among younger generations, creating opportunities for intergenerational knowledge transfer that might otherwise have been lost. The reconnection to agricultural heritage has strengthened community identity and resilience in regions facing not just environmental challenges but also cultural displacement. The economic model surrounding these ancient varieties differs fundamentally from that of modern commercial rice. Farmers cultivating these traditional varieties can save seeds yearly rather than relying on purchased seeds and chemical inputs, reducing input costs and increasing self-sufficiency. Some communities have established seed banks to ensure variety preservation and distribution, creating local resilience systems independent of global agricultural supply chains. This approach represents a different paradigm of agricultural development, one centered on resilience and sustainability rather than maximum productivity under ideal conditions. It challenges the notion that agricultural progress must always follow an industrial model of standardization and external inputs. Instead, it suggests that agricultural systems can be both productive and resilient through maintaining diversity and local adaptation. This model is particularly important in regions where farmers operate with minimal financial resources and cannot afford crop failures or expensive inputs. By reducing dependency on external systems, these ancient varieties help create more stable and self-sufficient agricultural communities. As climate adaptation becomes increasingly urgent across global agriculture, this revival of ancient rice varieties demonstrates how solutions sometimes lie not in novel technologies but in rediscovering knowledge and genetic resources from our agricultural past. The success of this initiative offers a template for similar explorations of historical crop varieties in other regions facing climate challenges. From drought-resistant wheat varieties in the Middle East to cold-tolerant potato landraces in the Andes, our agricultural heritage may contain numerous solutions to contemporary challenges. The ancient rice revolution reminds us that agricultural innovation does not always need to look forward. Sometimes, the most sustainable path forward involves a thoughtful return to the wisdom of the past, equipped with the scientific understanding of the present. This approach also highlights the value of maintaining agricultural biodiversity as a form of insurance against future challenges. The narrow genetic base of many modern crops represents a vulnerability that ancient farming systems, with their emphasis on diversity and local adaptation, managed to avoid. By learning from these systems, modern agriculture can become more resilient while maintaining the productivity needed to feed growing populations. The story of these flood-resistant rice varieties is still unfolding. As climate change accelerates, the value of these ancient adaptations will likely increase. Researchers are now expanding their search for other forgotten crop varieties with valuable traits for climate resilience. This work represents a race against time, as many traditional varieties and the knowledge systems that maintained them are disappearing rapidly in the face of agricultural modernization. Conservation efforts now focus not just on the genetic material but also on the cultural practices and knowledge that sustained these varieties for millennia. Looking forward, the most promising approach appears to be one that combines the best of traditional and modern agricultural science. By understanding the sophisticated adaptations present in ancient varieties and combining them with modern scientific knowledge, researchers hope to create agricultural systems that are both highly productive and inherently resilient to climate instability. This synthesis represents a new paradigm for agricultural development, one that values diversity, local adaptation, and traditional knowledge alongside scientific innovation. The ancient rice revolution may be just the beginning of a broader transformation in how we approach food security in a changing climate. The revival of ancient rice varieties represents far more than an archaeological curiosity. It embodies a profound shift in our approach to agricultural challenges. By turning to 3,000-year-old crops that survived complete submersion for weeks, scientists and farmers have found immediate solutions to climate-induced flooding that threatens millions of rice producers across Asia. The sub-1A gene, and other adaptations preserved in these ancient varieties offer genetic resources that modern breeding had inadvertently sacrificed in the pursuit of higher yields. But perhaps most importantly, this story challenges our notion of progress. The ancient rice revolution demonstrates that sometimes the most effective solutions don't require new technologies, but rather rediscovering knowledge that was preserved through generations of traditional farming. As climate change intensifies, this interdisciplinary approach, combining archaeology, genetics, agronomy, and indigenous knowledge, provides a template for addressing agricultural challenges worldwide. In the ancient rice fields being replanted today, we find not just crops more capable of withstanding floods, but a more resilient model of agriculture itself, one that values diversity, local adaptation, and the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of human agricultural experience. Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for updates. Your feedback is appreciated.